Welcome to the Men's 911 Show. Each week, mental health host experts Sharon Jackson and Tara Evans share their wisdom on how to help men afflicted with female abuse. The mission is to support men who have suffered interpersonal abuse and assault of domestic violence. More than 830,000 men fall victim to domestic violence every year, which means every 37.8 seconds, somewhere in America, a man is battered. Tara and Sharon tell the untold stories of abused men to bring awareness to the changes that need to take place so that men of all ages can receive the support and services they need to reach their potential for a healthy and meaningful life. Tara and Sharon help guide you on your way to improve outcomes for this underserved population. Okay, audience, here is Men 911 with Sharon Jackson and Tara Evans.
Welcome to the Men's 911 Show, coming to you on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. on KWRH 92.9 FM and KXOK 102.9 FM, simulcasting, and on the My Genre Radio Network, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. You may also listen to us live at usradionetwork.com. In today's society, approximately 1 in 8 men will experience domestic violence in the form of psychological trauma, physical violence, and or stalking by a female partner. The mission of the Men's 911 Show is to bring awareness and education, show support, provide resources and tools so that men can restore their identities as leaders, providers, and protectors in their families and their communities. Today, Sharon and I would like to welcome Carrie Baxter. Carrie Baxter is a business owner and entrepreneur from Northern Ireland and chairman of the Men's Alliance, a volunteer-led domestic abuse charity which manages the Manny Support Network on Facebook, dedicated to supporting men. Carrie created the Manny Support Network as his response to identifying a lack of services for men escaping or who have escaped abusive relationships. Welcome to the 911 Show, Carrie.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Yes, hello, Carrie. We go back about 3 years. I'm so excited that you're on, and thank you for taking the time to come on our radio show and spread the good news and education. The mission, you're welcome. The mission and goal of our show, of course, as we said it here, is to bring attention to men's issues and social injustices men experience today, and more specifically to male targets of domestic violence. Carrie, will you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the purpose of Men's Alliance and the background of how you created it?
Yeah, I can, certainly. My background for this last 30 plus years has been in business. And as such, I've always been looking for solutions to problems. So about 7 or 8 years ago, I identified that there was a major problem with the provision of services and support for male victims of domestic abuse. You know, men that had escaped or were trying to escape abusive relationships. There was really very little locally here in Northern Ireland to help them. Or if it was available, it was at the end of a waiting list, which then created this gap between when a man realised he needed the help and when he could actually get the help. And that, to me, was a glaring gap in service provision. So in 2018, the initial solution that we came up with was a support group on Facebook. So it was called the Manny Support Group, and it was initially based solely in Northern Ireland. So it started off small. There were a few members. Over the first year, we maybe got up to 150 members. We then got a little bit of funding through from local lotteries, and those numbers started to grow. So the concept is that it's peer support. So men join the group. They are admitted after answering a few questions, and they can read. They can, get themselves involved with questions and discussions that are going on within the group. But importantly, they can recognise that there is other men there in the same sort of situation. So the purposes initially were to provide them with that support, fill that gap between them asking for help and actually getting help. And we also have a purpose of raising awareness So we do advocacy. We speak to guys like yourselves. We speak to government departments, raising awareness of the issues that men are facing. It is a huge problem, and this is our solution or part of the solution to this problem in helping men. We also do physical groups. So once a week locally, we have a gym night where one of the local boxing clubs has kindly donated an evening of their premises to the Men's Alliance. We also do periodic walking clubs. We provide one-to-one support on the telephone, and those guys can phone us anytime and get in touch with us through our website. We speak to guys regularly, right up to 11, 12 o'clock at night, whenever they're in the mindset that they want to accept and look for that help, which is a brilliant offering that we can offer to them. So it's about initial connection with the guys, showing them they're not alone, and providing them with direction, information, and raising awareness.
That's great, Carrie. Can you talk a little bit about what's been some of the why it's difficult for men to reach out for help, or what are some of those issues that they don't openly reach out for help?
Yeah, but I mean, men face a lot of embarrassment. There's a lot of stigma around domestic abuse. They don't talk about it openly and naturally with their friends. They're too embarrassed. And society as a whole doesn't really accept men as victims of domestic abuse. So they find it very difficult to reach out. Certainly the men that we deal with, a lot of them, whenever they join the support groups on Facebook, they don't say much. They sit there, and eventually they'll come out and say something along the lines of, I've been reading everybody's posts. I thought I was alone. And it's fantastic that I have found this group, I have found this organisation, and I am now not alone. And that's hugely important. So it's embarrassment, it's stigma, it's because it's being told on a regular basis that he won't be believed. All these things are not true. He will be believed. He needs to find the right group and the right organisation to give him that belief and give him that support and give him the confidence or to get through the crisis after an abusive relationship breaks down.
Right. Do you find that many men, or have you ever had men who were abused and then didn't see themselves as being abused? Like there's some men that know they're being abused, but it's because of the stigma, they can't accept it. But others are being abused and they just stay in a state of denial.
It is a major issue for men. I mean, we're not taught about domestic abuse in school. We're not taught the red flags of abuse in a relationship. One thing that we do is we go around and speak to men's groups, and it's a 45-minute session where we raise awareness about the red flags of abuse in a relationship, so the guys can identify it in their own relationships, or they can identify it in others' relationships. And regularly, I can remember, it's about a year ago, a guy coming to me and saying, he got in touch with us. He knew something was going on, wasn't sure what it was. Spent an hour talking to him on the telephone. During that hour, he realised for himself he was in an abusive relationship. And a week later, we get a text message to say, "Thank you. I was thinking of ending it all because I didn't know what was going on in my life. I now have something I can focus on, and I know what's happening. I can do something about it." And it's hugely important because I would say a very large percentage of the men that we speak to, certainly initially, really do not realise what is going on in their relationship. They would describe their partner as being difficult, as being awkward, as being mouthy, as being a nag. They don't recognise that all those things are abuse.
Yes, thank you. I don't think we've talked about that, on our program so far, but it is the men who, right, they feel like they're depressed or get some anxiety, or they just don't feel right, and they can't put the pieces together. And the way some of these women abuse, and we've talked about it before, is very coercively. So it's
Yeah,
hard to detect. It's not always so obvious. It's not always a physical attack, but definitely a
yeah. Well,
contrived.
yeah, men face the full remit of abuse. We talk about domestic violence. To me, that is wrong because it is so much more than violence. It is domestic abuse. It can be emotional, psychological, physical, verbal, financial. There are a lot of areas to it. We did a survey in our group a couple of years ago, and we asked the guys what type of abuses were they facing. You've mentioned emotional abuse there. 96% were facing emotional abuse. Financial abuse, 73%. Controlling behaviours, 77%. Verbal abuse, 87%. So there's a wide range of abuse, but men tend to face more the sort of coercive type of abuses. Just recently in Northern Ireland, we have had new domestic abuse legislation around coercive control.
Right.
And I actually met with the victim commissioner, and she was very hopeful that this would actually encourage more men to come forward because it's more the type of abuse that men face.
Yes.
And abuses from their female intimate partners. It's more the coercive types of abuse, everything from manipulation through children, right through to emotional and psychological abuse. So there is the full remit for men, and it is just as impactful for men as it is for women. And we have to recognise that it does happen to women too. We're not about denying women as victims. That happens. Undoubtedly it happens, but it also happens to men.
Right. Oh, we're very much aware. We don't deny that women are not victims, but our mission is really to support men because they've been denied their realities with domestic violence for so many years, and there are very little resources. So yeah, we don't deny that, but we are very much an advocate and want to get the information out here and educate on how females abuse and how we can help men. I mean, nobody's doing it. Very few are doing it, and we just have to get that information out. I like it.
And the big one is about. Sorry, the big one was about funding. Certainly we see locally here, men's charities only get about 4% of the funding of female domestic abuse charities, and it's not about taking away funding from female charities. It's about finding alternative, funding resources to provide the same standard of support for these men. These men are not second-class victims.
Right.
They are victims of domestic abuse, and they need the help on par with what females do. And as I say, I will stress, we do not advocate for taking funding away from women to provide to men. It's about finding alternative sources of funding to provide services on par with what women have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was some of the challenge Tara and I had when we're trying to develop our respite house. People are concerned that we're going to dip into the pot, take it away from women. We don't want to take it away from women. We want men to have equal resources and funding. So that needs to change. It's how can people? Well, we talked a little bit about how people can become a member. What countries are you in at this time?
Well, the network's only really started expanding at the start of last year. So initially we started off in Northern Ireland. We then started up a support group in the Republic of Ireland. We then started another support group in Scotland and in England. Between those 4 support groups, there's about 3,000 men, which is a lot of men, but 50% of that is in our England group, and that's only developed in the last 12 months. And we've a long way to go to start saturation of the number of men that are there. But the important thing is, that this is on Facebook. It's freely available to anybody who has a Facebook account. But in the background, we can see the Facebook statistics. and it shows us that around in each of those support groups in Northern Ireland and in England, there is roughly 500 men every single day reading posts, commenting on posts, liking and interacting with those posts. And the important bit about that is that's where those men are getting the support that they need. They may not have got to the stage of actually asking for help or reaching out, but they're getting help and support from those posts, reading other men's experiences. And what happens after a number of months is they come forward and say, we've been reading these posts, we've been getting support from that. We would like to tell you our story, or my story. And then the story of tragedy pours out. And that's the stage they've got to whenever they start to open up. They can start to really get the help that they need. And we can start to intervene and advise them of where to go to and to find other services to help them. But we are very keen to expand that network. And if anyone in the States or Canada is thinking about trying to help men, maybe get in touch, because peer support is a huge way of being able to help men at a time whenever they need it most without a huge investment. We can use Facebook facilities, and it's just a case then of somebody monitoring what is going on. All our support groups, they're all monitored by social workers, by professionals, to ensure that there's good advice being given, that there is no misogynistic comments, there are no generalizations. It's a very safe place for these men to be. So I would ask, if anybody is interested in setting up a group, please get in touch. Let's talk about it, see if we can take the structure that we've developed, if we can take it to other countries and provide that help at scale and help thousands of men out there that need that sort of assistance.
Yes, that would be great. And I think you talked about it, but can you repeat it just one more time? How the support is structured through Facebook? Like, what would a man do, and what can he expect when he goes on the page?
Well, it's a normal support group, it's a normal group that you would see on Facebook. So it's a private group. So none of his friends will see that he's a member. None of his friends will see what he says or what goes on within the group. He can join and answers a couple of questions and is admitted into the group. Now the groups are regional. So, for example, if somebody from the States applies to the Northern Ireland group, unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to become a member, because we want to keep this as a regional support network, so that as does happen, the guys can go and meet up for coffees, and they know that other members of the group are not very far away from them. So he joins the group. He will see others' posts and comments within the group. What they've been saying, the problems they've had that day, the successes that they've had, all of which are celebrated. And he can either comment on it or just read it, get advice, and get support from actually just reading those comments. Whenever he is ready, he can comment in the group. He can either comment and leave his name on it, or he can comment anonymously. And those anonymous posts come to the admin of the site. We approve them. They go into the site, and then the other men will start commenting and supporting him in what he's doing, or advising him, or sending him in the right direction. If he is asking for specific help, we will make direct contact, offer to provide a phone call of support, or maybe advise him towards a certain solicitor, a certain support group, or counselling service, where he can avail of counselling services, or whatever information that he needs. It could be housing, it could be financial. We have financial advisors in the group as well. So all these areas are covered, and it's very much about providing these guys with support in an area they may never have had experience of. These guys, the average age is around 35. They may never have been involved with police, social services, judiciary, in their entire lives. And within a couple of days, their whole life could have fallen apart. They could have left, they could have been arrested and removed from their house based on false allegations. Yes. They could have So they've lost their housing, they've lost their personal belongings because they can't get them from the house. They've lost access to their children, and importantly, their children have lost access to them, and they may have lost their job. And this can all happen within a couple of days.
Right.
And I've spoken to many men that exact scenario has happened, and we're just there to try and provide them with a place that is safe for them to talk about what is going on in their lives. And we spend a lot of money just advertising on Facebook, so that a guy looks at his mobile phone, goes onto Facebook, and one of our advertisements will be there to show him where to get a bit of help.
Good. Boy, and you really made a really good point that, most of these men, this has not been in their history, right? There's not this abuse. People think that abuse victims have come from those backgrounds, and that's not very often the case. Most times these are good men trying to do what's right, and they get targeted by these females because they have something the female wants, and now they're stuck. And it's a similar case over and over. It's tragedy. It's very tragic.
Yeah.
How do you assist the children of the victims, or
do we want to?
Children? So we previously we had an adult child of a male victim. Do you get children of men or family members of men in your group trying to help these men?
Yeah. We actually run a separate support group for children or for friends and family. We call it of male victims. So it might be a daughter, it might be a son that recognizes their father is being abused by their mother or maybe in a new relationship. But most of those members of that group, it's quite a small group. There's about 250 members. They're actually mothers of sons who are in abusive relationships. So that help is provided there too. If they want to talk about it, we see a lot of frustration from family and friends. They want to know how to help and how to get them out of an abusive relationship. But it's a very, very difficult, very sensitive area to be involved in. A man is not going to leave an abusive relationship until he's ready.
Right. Yeah, we hear that too from parents. I think regardless of how old your child is, to know that they're being manipulated and abused and you can't do anything about it is quite frustrating and hurtful. And you're right. Your hands are pretty much tied.
So you were talking briefly there before about guys in these relationships and the type of guys, and I've been asked a number of times about what's the commonality between our group members, and the only thing we can come up with is they are some of the most compassionate men that you will ever meet.
Yes.
And undoubtedly, as you said, they're targeted. Undoubtedly, these men are targeted by abusive type personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And they're taken advantage of because they're easygoing, because they're just, in inverted commas, nice guys that just want to be a relationship. They want to be husband. They want to be dad. And they want everything that comes along with it. And these individuals, be it, male or female, it might be a gay relationship, they take advantage of that kind, generous person.
Yes.
And it's the only link we can see, apart from obviously the fact that they're victims of domestic abuse, between all these guys, because they come into our support group or one of the groups, and they are there to be helped, but they are also offering help to others.
Yes.
So they have that compassion and empathy to be able to offer help, support and belief to other guys.
That's so important. And I'm so glad you said that too, because it gives the man an opportunity then to help and to have that natural inclination to help and support others. Right. And I've said this before, that it is the good guys basically that get targeted because they're empathic and they're caring and they're kind and they just want to do what's right. And they get targeted every time. It's awful.
Yeah. It's proven on a daily.
Well, go ahead.
What's right? So I just want to say it's proven on a daily basis. These guys in the group, we have all the group rules about being respectful to other group members. no misogynistic comments, no generalizations. Very rarely have to enforce those comments or those rules. We very rarely have to get involved in conversations. And whenever I say very rarely, I mean once every 6 months, where these guys step out of the line, because they're not aggressive type guys. They just want to be left alone to enjoy their lives.
Right.
And it's fantastic to see the way they do interact with each other and provide that help to each other.
Yes, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful thing. I think that you might have an occasional man. When he gets angry, he might, what we call reactive abuse, maybe act out.
Yep,
But it's
yep.
just momentary. They can usually bring themselves
Yep.
back, right?
Yeah, but that can be where a lot of the trouble starts for these guys. An abusive relationship, it's coming to its peak. He's hit this one time too often, and he pushes her away, and that's as you say, reactive abuse. That's where the wheels fall off. The police become involved, social
Right.
services become involved, and his whole life can fall apart just because of that one momentary slip on his part.
Right. Very good. Well, Carrie, we're going to take a break here, and we will be right back after this sharp break.
Okay.
Have you always wanted to write your own book but don't know where to start? Publishing Concepts, a publishing company located right here in St. Louis, offers everything from consulting, book printing, copyrights, ISBNs and barcodes, print book layout, ebook and iBook layout, graphic design, cover design, ghostwriting, typing and editing, distribution, marketing, and more for an affordable price. Visit publishingconceptsllc.com or just Google Publishing Concepts to get started today, or call 314-781-8880. That's 314-781-8880. Publishing Concepts. We help you sell more books. Hey, listeners, saying thanks to your customers is nice and polite, but expressing your gratitude in memorable and ongoing ways can boost your business. At Promo Experts LLC, we exceed our customers' expectations. For over 20 years, our product knowledge and experience has helped them with their marketing initiatives and trade show graphics. We are happy to put that experience to work for you. Quality products, great customer service, and prices are our number one priority. We work with you to find unique, creative, and new ideas that fit your image and expectations, helping you build strong relationships with your customers. When you select Promo Experts as your marketing partner, we help you to see more than the big picture. For more information about this exciting opportunity, contact Diane Carson, President, at 636-458-5241. That's 636-458-5241. Let Promo Experts help you to move your business brand beyond the bland.
If you're looking for a new, informative health and lifestyle show to gain knowledge and inspiration to help guide your journey to think, work, and live more powerfully, then you need to listen to Sage Advice with Melissa. Now, whether you're trying to improve your life from a mental, physical, or spiritual journey, Sage Advice with Melissa Coleman, CEO of Sage Skincare, delivers weekly advice from industry experts to provide you with insightful suggestions to allow you to thrive with a better quality of life. Melissa's mission? To guide you through the uncharted waters of health and wellness and to give you a voice to help improve your life. So be sure to tune in to Melissa. You'll be glad you did.
Okay. Hello, audience. We've been talking to Carrie Baxter, business owner, entrepreneur from Northern Ireland, and chairman of Men's Alliance, a volunteer domestic abuse charity which manages the Manny Support Network, dedicated to supporting men. And set up as Carrie set this up as his response to identifying a lack of services for men escaping or who escaped abusive relationships. So hello, Carrie, we're back.
Hello there.
Hello. What is the, we were talking about that, what is the link that the men, what is some of the links of the men that you support, those commonalities?
The main commonality what we've discussed there is the type of person that they are. They're compassionate, they're empathetic. They're just all around nice guys. The commonalities in their abuse, there could be so many. There are so many different types of abuse, but the likelihood is a lot of these guys have suffered from any number of them. Those have just the verbal, emotional, financial, psychological, controlling behaviours. So there is a lot of common ground between these guys, so they can offer each other a lot of advice within the groups on what they're discussing and be of benefit to the other members of the group.
Good. I think you've talked about that, the different types. Can you give some examples of something men might relate to, of a type of abuse?
The types of abuse,
Or how it presents itself,
it's what's right?
or what it looks like in a relationship.
What it looks like in a relationship.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very hard for the guys to identify it in the relationship. Obviously, an outsider looking in may identify it quicker than the individual in the relationship. They talk about the boiling frog. If you drop a frog into cold water, it'll sit there. If you turn up the heat, it'll just sit there because it's getting used to the temperature, and eventually it'll realize it's time to escape, and it can't out of the hot water. And that's the comparison with men in abusive relationships. They get used to the abuses over time. As the abuse gradually increases, they become used to it. Generally, until it comes to a crunch point, some individual event may happen that they just can't avoid. They can't ignore. A lot of those times, it's where, as we spoke about a few moments ago, it's reactive abuse. They eventually crumble and react to the abuse they've been receiving, and next thing, the police are at the door. So, identifying that, looking in from the outside, might be easy for the person on the outside, not so easy for the person on the inside. If you're looking at somebody, say somebody's sat in a restaurant with you at a table, and their partner, be it male or female, is running them down, calling them pathetic, how they never please them. These could be indicators of domestic abuse within that relationship. From an employer's point of view, is a reliable employee all of a sudden becoming unreliable? Is he not turning up for work? Is he going home early? Has he got bruises? Is his demeanour changing? Is he just not the person that he used to be? Whenever we're doing educational evenings, we will talk about listening to your friends. If a friend ever says to you, you're not the person you used to be because of this relationship, there is an issue. If your personality is changing, there is an issue that needs to be addressed. So it's hard to identify for the individual, maybe easier for the people on the outside.
Right. Yeah, and one thing we know, that people who have trauma, this can be a post-traumatic stress trauma for these men, particularly if they've never lived in an environment around abuse, or they've never experienced it directly. It really is a trauma against them, and they can have typical trauma response. And some of that stuff is just zoning out, that freeze response, just where they look off into space. They can't focus. They can't concentrate. It's traumatic. It
is traumatic for the men that are suffering it, and they're going to find it very, very difficult to reach out. As we've said a number of times, maybe they just don't recognise it is happening to them. So sometimes it is good for somebody to go to them and say, "Are you okay?" And see what the response is. If they say yes, ask them again, ask them a second or third time, and give them that opportunity to try and open up and say there are some difficulties in a relationship.
Right. And I think you're right that when there's trauma, what and all trauma victims tend to do that, is normalize your situation to just to survive with it. Well, it's just my new normal. I have to learn to live with this. And
Yeah.
I think another important thing to understand is that these men typically are isolated from family and friends, because abusive women will, her goal is to eliminate anyone who loves that man and truly cares about him that came before her. That is a common theme that we found. She's, so
Yeah.
he ends up, she will end up destroying those relationships with people who really do care about the man, or isolating them, or making those people not come around, and just center him into her world and her social network, her church, her friends. And those
Yep.
people don't often see it. They just think, oh, well, you're coming over into our group. And so then the man doesn't have any objective reality, right? I mean, his friends are gone, his family's gone, his whole world is people who support her and see her reality. So oftentimes that confuses men too, I see, because, others in his social network might see it, but they just think it's normal, and they support her. So I think that isolation is real important. Men need to know, if there are people who are no longer in your life that were once in your life before her, that's a pretty good sign that you've been isolated and you're
Something's
targeted.
going on.
Yes.
Yeah, the survey that I mentioned we did of the guys, it was identified as one of the main issues. 63% of the guys have suffered alienation from
Yes.
friends and family. 56% had suffered alienation from their children. So undoubtedly, this is a tactic used against men in relationships, and those type of abuses can have huge impacts on these men, and specifically their mental health.
Yes.
Again, a survey that we did, it was 92% suffered from anxiety, depression, 81%. But I think the most terrifying figure that we came up with was that 45% of the men had considered taking their own lives. That shows the tragedy of these situations for men, that they get to the point where they consider taking their own lives. And undoubtedly, certainly here in the UK, 75% of suicide victims are male. And not much research from what we have seen is being done into identifying why.
Right.
And undoubtedly, there is a link between domestic abuse, parental alienation, and the high suicide rate for men.
Yes.
Now, we can't prove it because the research isn't here in Northern Ireland. We would hope somebody will take that up as a research project, but undoubtedly there is a link. And if there is a link, we should be doing something about it
Exactly.
to help these men through this crisis in their life. We've had a number of guys. I remember just recently, a guy joined the support group. Saturday morning, he puts a message into the group. I am so glad I found this group last night, and men like me. I was planning to kill myself today.
Oh, my God. Right.
That is the tragedy that these men are facing, and we need to help them with.
Yes.
They have to be, a hand put out to them to welcome them into these support groups where we can help them through this crisis in their life, which is temporary.
Yes.
Things will get better. Life will start to improve, but we need to make sure they're still around whenever it does.
Yes, Carrie. And you touched on a really important point that I've said many times. Academia, we do not have enough research. Nobody is taking up this in our academic universities. When you try and go for funding, people say, well, look at the statistics. It shows that women are most the victims. Well, that's because men don't report their abuse. And when they do report and the police come, police just try and calm the situation, or he'll have to take both of them in. We had a lawyer on who said, part of the problem is we are not asking the right questions. So we need to educate people when they're dealing with these to ask the right questions when there's a domestic violence case. Don't often just assume because she's crying and upset and he's angry that he's the perpetrator. Ask deeper questions. Particularly when I always say an angry man is a hurt man, and men don't have a large emotional range. So if a man is angry, you need to say, what's hurting you? Why are you angry? And hopefully get to the bottom of them. And if a man tells you, you need to respect that too, because it's very difficult for a man to open up and say what's really on his, on his heart and on his mind.
Yeah, you need to ask those more difficult questions, as you say, the more probing questions, but also believe him whenever he gives you the answer.
Yes.
It may be exceptionally difficult. For example, here locally, the housing executive are responsible for housing homeless people. But if a man who has left an abusive relationship goes to the housing executive, they won't ask if he is a victim of domestic abuse. If he is a victim of domestic abuse, they have a responsibility to house him, but they won't ask. They will assess. So a man that has been hiding this abuse for the last 10, 15, 20 years is assessed on something that he has become exceptionally good at hiding. And generally, they don't offer him housing. If he is lucky enough to be offered housing, he is offered a homeless shelter, which then is not a suitable place for children to go to, and it starts or encourages or supports the process of parental alienation.
Yes.
He is also in a place then where he isn't going to get professional help and specialist help that he needs. Housing for men in Northern Ireland, where we are, there's not a single bed for a male victim of domestic abuse, not one. There is only homeless shelters where he will not get the support and care that he needs. So it is a huge, as you rightly said, it is a huge issue overall for men. We need to start, welcoming men into the conversation, including them in media broadcasts, documentaries, news stories. Let men out there see that there are other male victims out there, that men are victims of domestic abuse. Because again, one of the issues is that men don't believe this happens to other men.
Right.
They think they're alone. They think this is the only one. They're the only one that is happening to. So we need to show them it's not. It's okay for you to come forward and ask for help. We're here for you.
Exactly.
We will not turn you away. We will believe you and we will support you.
Right. That's excellent. We had the same problem in the States. We have 2 safe houses that were designed specifically for men. One is the Taylor House in Arkansas and the Family Place in Texas. And they're specifically designed for men, but that's it. And they'll take anyone, even from around the world. But we need more safe, we call them respite houses, because safe houses that, we believe, our program believes that's emasculating. It's really even often emasculating to call a man a victim or to say he needs safety. What they really need is respite, because they're psychologically tormented. Their physical safety can be a factor, but it's more psychological. They just need to get away and to talk to somebody that can help them understand what's going on with them. You know.
And in a normal homeless shelter, they won't get that help.
Right.
They're just there to put a roof over their head. They're not attending to their mental health needs, and potentially this is going to lead them down the track to suicide, because they just see their life deteriorating. A man that's in an abusive relationship, happy with his children, nice home that he works 60 hours a week to provide, within a couple of days can end up in a homeless shelter.
Yes.
And a lot of that could be based on false allegations. False allegations is another huge area where there are massive issues with belief of men, and false allegations towards men. And certainly in Northern Ireland, where we are, no repercussions for the liar that comes forward and makes false allegations. So it just encourages this culture of repeated false allegations. But it's another whole story for another day.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to bring up, there's this term that I call coercive chivalry. This is, and if there's any men out there who've been pulled away from their children by a woman who, men will say, if you don't love my girlfriend or my wife, you're out of my life because she's the primary person in my life. I mean, they'll give up their own children. Well, men need their children in their family, and that is a tactic of coercive control by that female to get you away from your children. Your children need their fathers need their children. And if if a woman loves you, what she will say to you, men, is, this is tough. Your ex and their mother is making this tough on us, and your children probably don't like me, but I know your children need you in your life, and I love you, and I want to make this work. let's keep these children in your life. So a female who loves you will understand the importance of those children in your life. She's not going to try and isolate you from them. That's another sign
Yeah.
that you're being manipulated.
Yeah. We hear time and time again about men talking about their children, and it's always children first.
Yes.
That's all they talk about. Their own health, their own self-care comes secondary to the children. But as we say to them on a regular basis, if you're on an airplane, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first. Because if you run out of oxygen, you're going to be no good to anybody. And that's very much the same in this scenario. These guys need to look after themselves. They need to look after their own mental health, their own self-care, their physical well-being, and then they can be there for their children. And children, I think it isn't highlighted enough, just how important that relationship between a father and child, or a child and a father is. And, how important it is to these men, and how devastating it is that they can, fall out with an abusive partner, and they're put out on the street and they lose access to their children. They have to go to court to get access. Then the false allegations come along of, child molestation, rape, physical or psychological abuse, and the child contact is stopped or doesn't start until those false allegations are sorted out. So it's a vicious circle.
Yes.
And we really need to focus more on what is good for the child. And undoubtedly, the relationship with the father is undoubtedly beneficial to any child.
Yes, absolutely. And another part
Hey,
of
Sharon,
that.
can I ask one question?
Oh, sure, Tara, go ahead.
Sure. So I just want to ask Kerry, what policy changes would he like to see made as far as males and their services and legislation?
The legislation, I mean, certainly here in Northern Ireland, legislation is very gender neutral. So it's not about getting extra legislation. It's about putting or acting that legislation equally for both male and female victims and survivors. The work has been done. I'm not sure, forgive me, I'm not sure exactly the situation in the States, but certainly where domestic abuse legislation is in place, or coercive control legislation is in place, make it gender neutral. So it can be applied to both men and women equally, and they can benefit equally from it, because they all suffer equally from the domestic abuse. So why shouldn't they all benefit from the legislation that's there?
Right. When we hear about male victims of domestic violence, we often hear it presented as a male-on-male problem. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it is presented as a male-on-male problem, and certainly here locally where we are, that's what they say, due to the police statistics, that primarily male victims that end up with the police, they've been abused by a male partner. Now, number one, the implication is that that's a gay relationship, which is a pretty homophobic statement to make. But also, those men that go to the police, they've only gone to the police because it has got to such a stage where they can't endure it anymore, and it is really serious. It is really serious for them to do that. And one of the reasons they go to the police is they're okay to go to the police is because they're being abused by a man. Now, it might be a father, it might be a son, it might be a brother, it might be a gay or bisexual relationship, but it's ultimately because they're okay with it. They might be embarrassed about going to the police about it being abused by a woman, but they're okay to go to the police about being abused by a man. So it all falls back on the guys. There's not enough men coming forward to actually report their abuse because of this, societal taboo about being a man and being abused by a woman. Men, we need to get to the position where men are comfortable with reporting what is abuse. What is an illegal thing to do now in a lot of countries, where people can be arrested for it. So, is it a case of it's primarily men on men? No, it is a case of men are not comfortable with reporting it to the police if it's a woman. And one statistic which I'll use as evidence to that, our support group is open to anybody that identifies as a man. You can be a straight man, gay, bisexual, transsexual. We don't care. If you do or have ever identified as a man, we will provide you with help. We know that in excess of 95% of the men that we support are victims of abusive women.
Yes.
And that's an important distinction there. We're not generalizing. We're not saying women are the issue, as we hear about men being the issue about female abuse. We're talking specifically about the very small minority of abusive women, the same as there's a very small minority of abusive men. So those numbers of people that we have in the group, 5% are probably victims of men. And it could be brothers, it could be family members. 95% are victims of female intimate partners. So to me, that just junks any claims that male domestic abuse is a male-on-male issue. It is not. The main problem behind it is men won't report it. And we need to encourage men to come forward, talk about it, report it to the police, and seek help. That is hugely important.
Yes. And I think that's when we talk about the statistics are wrong. And that's over and over in other groups that I've had too. It's been 94% female abusing men, 5% the other way around. So it's clearly an international problem.
We need to look at domestic abuse not as a male on female or a female on male issue, or a male on male issue or a female on female issue. It's a people on people issue.
Yes.
People abuse people. The bottom line, people abuse people. Doesn't matter if they're male or female. They can both be either victims or perpetrators. And the ones that are perpetrators are a very small minority of abusive men or abusive women.
Yes.
And we cannot tar every single man and every single woman out there as being part of this group of abusers, because they're not. And this is one of the issues that we see in the media. You're talking about the media there a short time ago and how things are presented. What do we need to change? We need to change this rhetoric that men are the problem.
Right.
Men are not the problem. Abusive men are the problem.
Yes.
And this is a hugely important distinction, because talking about men as being the problem around domestic abuse for women is victimizing the male victims over and over and over again. They hear that they are the problem. Men are the problem whenever it comes to domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is a woman's problem. It's not. It's a people problem. The same as there are a very small number of abusive women, there are a very small number of abusive men. Please don't tar us all the same.
Right. Thank you for saying that. I think too, I always, to be realistic, the majority of people are good people, right? I mean, most people live their life. They're good. They do what's right. But there's that percentage that makes it difficult for others, whatever crime it is. And when it comes to domestic violence, it's no different. But our mission is the domestic violence narrative and agenda has left out men. They're being victims and women being the abuse of women. So we have to have more dialogue and education on that. But you're certainly right. The majority of people are good, right? What kind of curious, Gary. What do you think perpetrators, female perpetrators, need to hear? What would you like to tell them?
You can't hide.
Yes.
It'd be great to say that they cannot hide, that they will eventually be caught. They will eventually face the full force of the law. They will eventually be pointed out. But they're destroying men's lives. And importantly, if they have children, they're going to be damaging their own children through domestic abuse. Ultimately, who is it really suffers long term in these relationships where there's children involved? It is the children. They will be carrying this for the rest of their lives. And if you're a mother and doing that to your child, what can I say? You know, it needs to change. Something needs to change in society, where domestic abuse against men is almost got to the stage of where it's acceptable. It's not. You know, and women or men that are abusing men need to recognize that.
Exactly. Why do you think, you may have touched on this, but why do you think domestic violence against men as an issue does not have the same profile as females?
Well, domestic abuse against women has been, you know, women have been encouraged, raising awareness about this since the mid-70s, since Aaron Busy first opened the first domestic abuse refuge in London. They've had 50 years of doing an amazing job of raising awareness about female domestic abuse, and raising money and providing support services. And one of those things that you know, women see it as a problem for us, as a woman's problem. So they all pull together and try and work on it as a group. Unfortunately, with men, they see it as my problem. This is a problem for me. And men find it very difficult to actually pull together and join forces and work with other men and actually do something really constructive for those men still in abusive relationships that we need to rescue. So it is an issue. You know, men need to pull together. They need to recognize it is not a me problem or my problem. It is an us problem, and come together and try and help each other to, you know, raise awareness about the issues and provide solutions and care for those men that are coming out of abusive relationships.
Right. We have about 3 minutes left. I wanted to touch on a little bit, if you could speak, because you are international, if you could speak to the number of men from different countries that you've supported, and what are some of the cultural differences that you're seeing when it comes to domestic violence against men?
Well, certainly our own experiences, or my personal own experience of talking to other men in other jurisdictions, very much the abuses that men are facing are very much the same. The societal stigma is very much the same. It does go on to other levels. You know, I spoke to guys in Australia, and there was very much this machoism. People talk about toxic masculinity. You know, around domestic abuse, you know, men can't be abused. It's unacceptable that men are. I've spoken to men in other countries where the man that was abused actually ended up being arrested and prosecuted for allowing himself to be abused, which is nuts on anybody's scale. But generally, the types of abuse that men are facing, the societal response to that, the support that's provided, the whole infrastructure around it is very similar worldwide, in that men are not believed. Men are not provided with the support that they need. Men are not receiving services and support on par with what women receive, rightly. So there are very few differences. This is not, we talk about a societal problem, it's a worldwide societal problem in accepting men as victims of domestic abuse, and something we really need to do something about. You know, we're ignoring half the population of the world as victims of something which is an insidious crime, which we need to provide help for them.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you so much. Audience, we would like to thank our guest, Carrie Baxter from the Men's Alliance. If you are experiencing domestic violence, contact the Manny Group on Facebook or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-7233. Or for men, call the Family Place at 214-941-1888. Thank you for listening to the Men's 911 Show. Thank you so much, Carrie. Tune in next week for more education, information, and support for the untold stories of men. Hey, Carrie.
Hello there.
Hey, I just want to thank you so much.
No problem.
We'll be in
Thank
touch.
you. Hopefully you got out of it what you wanted.
Yes, we did. It's wonderful. We'll have you back on again. And I was wondering if
Very
you
good.
could, if you any family member that you think would be willing to come on, can you, I'll email you and we'll stay in touch. I'd love to have a family member come on too, if they'd be willing to. They can come on anonymously if they want.
Yeah, I know of one that might.
Okay.
Unfortunately, a lot of family members won't
Right.
publicly, the same as the men, because of embarrassment and shame, and they don't want to get their family member or their friend into trouble.
Right.
So they're always afraid of saying too much. So it is an exceptionally sensitive area
I know.
to be able to talk about. But what we have found a few times whenever we've been on the radio, sometimes family members phone in afterwards, and we have had that, on phone-in shows, just to speak about it. But yeah, it is difficult.
Yes, that's good. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Carrie. I'll be in touch. We'll stay connected.
No problem.
Okay. Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Sharon. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye now.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Might as well jump. Go ahead and jump. Get in and jump. Go ahead and jump. 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 Jump.
Dope. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do do do.
This is that ice cold Michelle fight for that white gold. This one for them hood girls, them good girls, straight masterpieces. Styling, wildin', living it up in the city. Got Chuck's on with Saint Laurent. Gotta kiss myself, I'm so pretty. I'm too hot. Call the police and the fireman. I'm too hot. Make a dragon wanna retire, man. I'm too hot. Say my name, you know who I am. I'm too hot. And my band about that money. Break it down. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. Saturday night and we in the spot. Don't believe me, just watch. Come on. Don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch.